Ooh, guys, it is the end of the day, Latin 2. End of the day. And I am so tired. But you know what? We need to get this film done. Because in just a few short days from this filming, we're going to be reading a chapter that has more passive verbs in it. When I say more passive verbs, I don't mean a greater number, I mean more kinds. Because in the last passive video, I told you how to recognize and interpret present, imperfect, and future tense passive verbs. If you have not seen that, or if you need a review, go watch it or go watch it again, okay? But every single tense can be passive, can potentially be passive, which includes the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect. So we need to be able to do those too. And they look actually a lot different than the present system ones do, right? Because the present system passives in Latin are way different than how we do passives in English. In English, basically, we take an adjective, right? I used amore the other day, the word love. And in English, when we make love passive, we essentially take the adjective loved, a verbal adjective, and then use the verb to be with it, which is why every single passive form that we translated always had some version of the word to be in it. And that just wasn't what we did for the present, the imperfect, or the future. We had our present stem and we stuck special passive endings on them. Not what we're going to do in the perfect. In the perfect, we actually do something really similar to what I just described us doing in English. We use essentially an adjective, and then we put a form of the verb to be with it. So this is where our fourth principal part is finally going to come into play. All right, so here I have the four principal parts of amo listed out. Not every verb has four principal parts, but most do. At some point later, we'll talk about why some don't. But we have amo, which is literally I love, amare, which is literally to love, the infinitive, but of course we use it for deriving the present stem. We have, I have to orientate my hand now. We have amawi, which literally means I have loved, and from that we derive the perfect stem. And then there's this thing, amatus, or depending on what dictionary you use, it might also be spelled amatum. They make different orthographical choices. This is what is known as the supine stem, and it's called that because we use it to form the supine. I'm not going to explain supines right now in Latin 2. Latin 2 does not need to know about supines. If you are desperate to find out, I actually just filmed a video on this for Latin 4. But if you're in Latin 2, I don't recommend you watch it. Don't. But I can't stop you, so if you really want to, you can go do it. Anyway, don't worry about supines. What you should worry about, though, is that the supine stem, in addition to forming the supine, which is a totally weird thing you don't need to know about right now, it also is used for forming perfect passive verbs. All right? The word amatus on its own is really just the adjective loved. And I'll be talking more about that really soon. But for now, just accept that as a fact. And then when you want to turn that adjective into a perfect passive verb, this is what you do. You put a form of the verb to be with it, which is to say our forms of sumessa. So, back in Latin 1, I stressed over and over and over again how sumessa is very far and away the most important verb you will ever learn. And that is in part because it is already super common on its own and because you use it with other things, like this. Which is to say, if you made it through Latin 1 and did not learn these, or more importantly and more likely, if you did learn them in Latin 1 but you've forgotten because it's been a year or X number of months since then, now is a time when you need to go back and look at those forms and make sure you have them down, all right? They show up all the time on their own. They also are going to show up all the time as part of perfect passive verbs. All right? And the way you're going to translate this in English is you're going to translate this as a perfect, which is to say with a have, as a passive, which is to say with a been, and then, whatever the word actually means with an ed on the end. So this would be I have been loved, you have been loved, he, she, it has been loved, we have been loved, you all have been loved, they have been loved. Well, actually, hold on. I need to make a little caveat there because down here at the bottom I said this is he, she, or it has been loved. But is it though? Is it though? That's normally what I would say about the third person. But actually with this specific form, this actually is not he, she, or it has been loved. This one is specifically he has been loved. And you might be thinking, whoa, 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 how do I know the subject is a boy? Well, if it's spelled this way, then the subject is a boy because this is an adjective, amatos, and est. The only part that I'm conjugating is the sumesa. The adjective doesn't have a verb ending that changes. It has a case ending that agrees with the subject. And in this particular table, for example purposes, I just wrote the masculine every time. But the subject won't always be masculine. If my subject is a boy, then yeah, I can say amatus est, but or for that matter, if I, the speaker, am a boy, then I can say amatus sum. But you could totally have a woman say amatus sum, except she wouldn't say amatus sum. She would have to use the feminine version of her adjective, amata sum. And that goes for any of these other forms. If you were trying to say you have been loved and you're talking to a boy, then yes, you would say amatus es. But if you're talking to a woman, you would say amata es. So I only have the masculine forms written down here, but you will see amata instead of amatus sometimes, and even amatum, the neuter. Same for the plural side, where you have amati here to be plural and masculine. It could be amatai with the ae for the feminine, or amata with the plural a for the neuter. Okay? So that's what these forms look like, or at least in the perfect. There is also a pluperfect, but it's actually not that hard. You're going to do the same things, except instead of using sum eset, you're going to use eram, era, serat. Eram is how you go one step back in the past from sum. So it's what we're going to do to get the pluperfect. Whereas you translate the other ones as I have been loved, you would translate these as I had been loved. Had because it's pluperfect, been because it's passive, and then whatever your verb is plus ed. All right? Which is to say your imperfect forms assume. If you don't already know your imperfect forms assume, go learn them right now. Or, even just pause this video here and memorize them because they're right in front of you right now. And you need to know them, again, because they're super common on their own, but also because now you need to know them as part of your pluperfect passive form. And actually, it's basically the same deal in the future perfect passive as well. But you're going to use future forms of sum. Ero, eris, erit, erimos, eritis, erunt. So, I will have been loved, you will have been loved, he will have been loved. You do have to use the will have. Will because it's future, have because it's perfect, been because it's passive, and then whatever the verb means, etc. Okay? Now, I do want to show you some examples of how this might be used in a sentence. So here is, just a sentence like a lot of others that I've shown you in various videos. Taught is a word, actually I don't know if we've seen that one yet in Latin too, but it means like so often. It's similar to quat, which means how often. So it says, so often or so frequently have my feet been bitten by the cats. So I've got my perfect passive verb here, morsi sunt, have been bitten. The subject here is pedes, my feet. And I even have an ablative of agent in here, felibus, right, by the cats. They're the ones who bite my feet. So often have my feet been bitten by the cats, all right? I'm using a perfect passive, and that's all that sentence does. I do think, though, that I should show you at least a couple of more examples, in part, not because this is all that hard. I mean, I think if you understand this example, then you can extrapolate to anything else. But something that's worth pointing out, and a reason why we should see more examples, is that because our passive verb form here is 2 words long, you won't necessarily see it always like this. Usually, this is the way you see it. Usually, you're going to see that adjective form, no matter what gender it is, no matter what number it is, you're going to see that adjective form followed by one of these versions of sum. However, we know that word order is flexible in Latin, and you could totally have something like this, which is to say, before I got home, my flower had been chewed a fele by a cat. And you'll notice in this one, I still have my perfect form in the same order, but it was interrupted. My ablative of agent is stuck in between the morsus and the erat. And that's totally a thing. That can happen. I'm not going to say it's going to happen all the time or even necessarily often. But when your verb is 2 words long, it's possible to have a phrase or something or a word in between one part of the verb and the other part of the verb, especially if it's something that, adverbially pertains to the verb. If there's an adverb that goes with this verb specifically, it's actually not uncommon at all to go ahead and stick it between the morsis and the morsis and the aorist, or whatever your verb happens to be. In this case, this is a pretty likely candidate to get stuck in between because, again, it's an ablative agent and it's the agent of the verb that it is hiding inside of. It's not a promise, and it doesn't have to be there. It could have gone somewhere else in the sentence, but it also can stick between those 2 words, and that's totally fine. And for that matter, the 2 words don't even have to be in that order. They can be switched. They're not usually. Usually the form of sum is going to come second, but it doesn't have to be. And I've definitely seen sentences where it isn't. Like this one, if the cats will have been loved, then they will love you too. So there you go. Hopefully that all makes sense to you. I'm going to get this posted. Well, today is a couple of days out before we read chapter 32, but I'll get this posted sometime in the next day or so before we read chapter 32 because these show up in chapter 32. And if you're watching this in the future for review and you're trying to remember, oh, where was this form in the book again? It's in chapter 32. Go look at that, all right? Of course, it's for Ecce Romani. If you're some stranger watching this and you're like, I don't know what chapter 32 means, it's in Ecce Romani. But also, if you're a stranger and you found me, then you can find any number of other Latin sources. So have fun, guys, and I will talk to you later. Bye.